All right, Matt, the floor is yours, my friend.
All right. So AC/DC's Back in Black, and then the opening montage you heard Hell's Bells, and now you're going to hear a clip from You Shook. Okay, so Back in Black comes in at number 17 in the 1980s on Best Ever Albums, number 3 in 1980, and number 136 of all time. It also made Rolling Stone's list, coming in at number 84. The album was recorded from April to May of 1980, and it was released on July 25th, 1980. And it is AC/DC's 7th studio album. This is the one that came right after Highway to Hell, which we covered about a couple months ago in the 1970s. Again, it was produced by Mutt Lange, so he makes another appearance here as the producer. And this album yields 4 singles: You Shook Me All Night Long, Hell's Bells, Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution, and Back in Black. And this is a big one, guys. It has sold an estimated 50 million copies worldwide, making it the second best-selling album in music history.
Wow.
Behind, of course...
Thriller.
Exactly, yep. So this is... sold a ton of records. It does include the band members Brian Johnson on lead vocals, Angus Young on lead guitar, Malcolm Young on rhythm guitar and backing vocals, Cliff Williams on bass and backing vocals, and Phil Rudd on drums.
My favorite thing is that Back in Black has 992,163,355 plays.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's close to 1 billion, if I'm not mistaken, John.
Close to.
Yeah.
It's probably about 990,000 more than you need to hear, but
999. Matt, that was the same spot.
All right, so a little history of this. So the group had just come off the heels of their success with 79's Highway to Hell, and they begin recording for the follow-up record, and that's, of course, when tragedy strikes on February 19th, 1980. At that time, lead singer Bon Scott passed out in a car on the way to a friend's house after a night of drinking. The friend's name was Alistair Kinnear. And so they get to Kinnear's house, and Kinnear can't really wake him up or move him from the car, so he decides just to leave him there, let him sleep it off. And then the next morning, Kinnear finds Scott non-responsive, and he rushes him to the King's College Hospital, where he was pronounced dead on arrival. And the cause of death was acute alcohol poisoning and pulmonary aspiration of vomit. So, yeah, we talked a little bit about his hard living the last episode, and or last time we covered them. So, obviously, this was very traumatic for the band. They considered retiring and calling it quits, but this was refuted. Or basically, Scott's parents were encouraging the band to keep going on. That's what he would have wanted, and so they kind of agreed. They considered a number of different replacements, and but they did remember Brian Johnson, who was formerly of a band called Georgie, which I had never heard of before, Gordgie. I don't know if you guys have heard of that band before, but that was his band in the 70s. And but they had remembered Bon Scott being impressed by Johnson's vocals, and the other members decided to seek him out, and he was announced as a new lead singer on April 1st, 1980.
Oh, so he'd gotten co-signed sort of by Bon Scott unofficially. Okay.
Yeah, he was actually probably. It sounded like Bon Scott was more familiar with him than anybody else, and so but everybody else was kind of aware of who he was, and they decided to go with him. And this album was written by Malcolm and Angus Young, as well as Brian Johnson, and recorded over 7 weeks in the Bahamas. So it's another one of those things where they leave England. Well, first of all, they apparently said they wanted to record there, but there weren't any studios available somehow. So they were like, we have no place to go, and they also thought we could go somewhere else and avoid taxes. So they go to the Bahamas and they record in the Bahamas.
That's one of those let's make a decision and then think about what's going to happen afterwards.
Yeah.
If you can't trust AC/DC to make a solid decision on the fly, then who can you trust, guys?
I just love it. Like everybody, it's like the taxes in England. We keep coming back to that some way. Exactly. Yeah.
Were they brutal? Were they bad, but also rock stars like to spend money, or what do you think it was like?
You know what? They probably weren't. Well, I don't know. It probably depends, right? I know the Beatles were getting like crazy hit crazy hard with the taxes, like an unbelievable amount. So I don't know if AC/DC was quite that level, but it does seem like it's affecting a lot of people, and they're pissed off. So,
well, the tax rate in England in 1979, it stands out here, so right around this area.
Okay.
The top rate was reduced from 83% to 60%, and the basic rate was 33 to 30%. So basically, it looks like they had a progressive income tax, which is like the richer you were, the more you paid, which actually the United States did too, like in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
And
83 is pretty. Yeah, that's right. The 83 is pretty freaking high. Can you imagine somebody trying to get?
Well, but it's only for the top.
No?
It's only for the top 2%.
Yeah.
In England. So I mean, it's kind of like, I guess it comes down to what your politics are, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they decided to go with Brian Johnson's lyrics. They didn't want to. Bon Scott had written some lyrics for the record, but they didn't want to. They didn't want to use them as, they thought that maybe profiting off of his lyrics after his death would have been in poor taste. So they just let Brian Johnson write all the lyrics. Recording was not easy, as the studio was a little subpar in the Bahamas, and they also had to endure several tropical storms. And some of that was actually reflected in Johnson's lyrics, like the opening lyrics to Hell's Bells is reflecting the storms that were actually happening while they were recording. So Mutt Lange certainly did not lose any of his professionalism and his perfectionism, really. I mean, because he was driving the band members crazy, especially Brian Johnson. He had him just sing out one note at a time. He was really specific about when he should take a breath. He didn't want the album to sound like it was too produced, that he was so produced that somebody actually could not sing, like hold the notes out as long as the effects were. So he was really trying to train Brian Johnson to sing in a certain way, but he absolutely drove him nuts. So that wasn't a pleasant experience for him. But upon the release, the album was pretty much an immediate success. It topped the UK charts for 2 weeks, and it made it to number 4 in the US charts, where it stayed in the top 10 for over 5 months. The success of the record also propelled the previous albums, Highway to Hell, If You Want Blood, You Got It, and Let There Be Rock, to all enter the British charts again, which made AC/DC the first band since the Beatles to have 4 albums in the British Top 100 charts at the same time.
Wow.
Yep. It also prompted the U.S. label Atlantic to release Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap in the United States for the first time. So they're not only getting a ton of sales of Back in Black, but it's seeing a resurgence in their other sales. And this is just, they're going to the stratosphere here with this record. A couple of reviews that I had to laugh at, I wanted to share because there were some mixed reviews here. David Frick, writing for Rolling Stone in 1980, regarded Back in Black as, quote, not only the best of AC/DC's 6 American albums, but the apex of heavy metal art, the first LP since Led Zeppelin II that captures all the blood, sweat, and arrogance of the genre. While Robert Christgau was less than enthusiastic, finding the band somewhat, quote, too primitive and their sexual imagery unimaginative. He said that Angus Young does come up with killer riffs, though not as consistently as a refined person like myself might hope. A little arrogance there. And lead singer Brian Johnson sings like there's a cattle prod at his scrotum. Just this thing for fans who can't decide whether their newfound testosterone is agony or ecstasy. And he also called You Shook Me All Night Long a drum-hooked fuck song and the band's only great work of art. So he wasn't a fan. But then somebody, I like this one, Kitty Empire of the Observer, acknowledged that Back in Black is a preposterous, drognoid record built on casual sexism, eye-rolling double entendres, a highly questionable attitude to sexual consent, a penchant for firearms, and a crass celebration of the unthinking macho hedonism that killed the band's original singer. Nonetheless, she concurred with Frick's original view of the album as a heavy metal masterpiece and named it her favorite album ever. So I loved reading those reviews. But yeah, this is a huge album. It's sold a ridiculous amount of records, and I have a couple things to follow up here. But John, what's your take on Back in Black?
I mean, let me start by saying that any album with a 3-song run of "What You Do for Money, Honey," "Giving the Dog a Bone," and "Let Me Put My Love Into You" is, I mean, you kind of know what you're getting.
That's Kiss level song title
that's
right
Spinal Tap level song
Yes.
titles
I
right
wrote
there.
that
It's
down,
kind of what it
actually.
is. Yeah. So
Cut
I mean,
my cake with your knife.
it's and yeah, I was about to say, and that's just the titles. Within it, it's even more. So I love also like that most of like AC/DC's songs are sort of about like living life on the edge a little bit, and you know, and also like just things like "have a drink on me" can be like "have a drink on me" or like literally "have a drink on me." You know what I mean? It's kind of you know, stuff like that. So I do love AC/DC for. I mean, this is such a hard album to rate because it's like remember when the Cars called their first album their greatest hits album, and they joked around about like that. This is I mean, AC/DC has a ton of hits, right? But this is sort of the pinnacle ones, right? You've got "Hell's Bells" to start, which is just a big. Iconic, to use a word that's overused, but iconic song. "Shoot to Thrill" is this just gigantic blues. The whole album is just gigantic blues riffs, right? With just blues riffs with heavy, like riffing, you know, metallic riffing on a blues rip ahead of it, and just, you know, throat ripping out vocals, which is to me, that's the Brian. Bon Scott sang that way too, but Brian Johnson like takes it to the arena rock, you know, like there's an element of bombast with him, right? There's no subtlety or like winking at all with him, like there was with Bon Scott a little bit. Like Bon Scott always seemed to me more to be tailored a little bit more to like pubs or mid-sized things. Like when they get Brian Johnson, like this is the beginning of like AC/DC as like a massive like arena rock band, and like it leads like the later 80s where it's like, you know, Thunderstruck and Money Talks and, you know, all this TNT, you know, songs like that are just these huge, massive songs like that. So this is the beginning of that. So yeah, you go from "Shoot to Thrill," then you get the 3 double entendre songs. You get "Back in Black," which is massive and a huge hit. You've got "You Shook Me All Night Long," which is funny because like I always have described "You Shook Me All Night Long" as like, it's kind of like "Pour Some Sugar on Me" in the fact that like you could hear it in a mall and like an older conservative woman would say, "Oh, I really like that song."
Yeah.
Or it sounds like the first song that the stripper of the night like listens to as well. Like, and it somehow makes both work, you know? Like it's like first song in the strip club mixed with like song played that 55-year-old mother in Des Moines, Iowa like also likes, which it's hard to write a song like that. You know, that can get both audiences. But there you go. "You Shook Me All Night Long" is that song. "Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution" is... It sounds like it should be on like the Bill and Ted soundtrack to some degree. I've always felt like, and it's another massive hit. I do think I've always loved the song "Shake a Leg" as well, and I've always thought that's one of the most, that and "Shoot to Thrill" are, I feel, two very underrated AC/DC songs. But yeah, I mean, AC/DC is not going to reinvent the wheel. I know that there are a couple people who are really, really angry at me for saying that AC/DC operates in the same lane that Kiss does, but I'm not going to differentiate from that because they're both blues-based rock groups, right? That, you know, play huge, heavy riffs, have great stage performances. They don't reinvent the wheel. You know, does Angus Young have a little bit more creativity and musical ability in terms of songs? Sure, I absolutely say that. But I feel like to some degree they're designed to be played loud. They're designed to be, you know, either blasting out of your speakers in a car or, you know, you tailgate and you go watch them. And I love that. You know, that's what like hard rock is supposed to be. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be played loud. It's not supposed to make you overthink or wonder about ulterior motives. You know what I mean? It's about, you know, drinking, screwing, you know, living life, exciting, being young, you know.
Giving dogs bones.
But just that's what I'm getting at. It's like a hedonistic thing. It's almost like you get to live by proxy. And, you know, I worry a little bit about rock that we've kind of gone away from people not being able to recognize like when somebody's winking at you, you know, talking about this stuff and when they're being dead serious.
Right.
AC/DC's kind of hard though, because like Bon Scott kind of did live that lifestyle, which did do it. But I think there is a lot of winking. You know, you know, these stories are ridiculous on the face, some of them, and so from that end of things, I always hope there is rock and roll like this. I don't want to say like big dumb rock and roll because it's not dumb, but like just big riff heavy, blues-based rock that's, amplifier plugged in, turned up to 11 type rock. So yeah, I mean, this is an easy thumbs up for me. How can you not like Back in Black? My God, it's like cotton candy in the best way possible. So yeah, I mean, obviously strong recommend here. This is great stuff. And by the way, it's also an upgrade on Highway to Hell, I'd like to point out, because this album's, I think, way more consistent and doesn't really have any tracks that slow down the process. I mean, this is just straight ahead the whole time. So to me, there is a higher level here that they reached with this album from Highway to Hell.
I mean, arguably, this is their highest level. This is the album you would give somebody to introduce.
Well, it's the second biggest selling album of all time. Yeah, what's the higher level?
And I would push back. These are barely double entendres. They are like entendres. There's
exactly.
There's no like subtext. What can you say about this album? It's got a huge amount of hits. I heard this album so many times and some of these songs so many times that I kind of know every beat to them in some way, like down to like playing the air drums or like when a riff comes in. And they are just, AC/DC is like the perfect workout music for me. It's really like gets you energized. It, like you said, it just it gets you in a good mood. It just brings the energy, and it's like cock rock at its finest, I suppose. And you're there for, like you said, the kind of tongue-in-cheek nature of it, plus like the massive guitar riffs and Angus Young that they come up over and over again in this thing, starting with Hell's Bells and ending with Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution. But I think there is sometimes, I think we said this on their previous album, that some of the songs and riffs kind of like are interchangeable with other songs on their albums. Like this is almost like a greatest hit song, but some of them kind of remind me of other AC/DC songs. Like Shake a Leg, the start of that sounds almost exactly like Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap. And some of them, like Let Me Put My Love Into You, has a similar opening to Hell's Bells. Like that's it, on the same album. It's kind of like similar. You get, it's like flashbacks to the earlier in the album. Even though
in the Spinal Tap it was a ballad, but every time I hear "Let Me Put My Love in You," I think of the song when the guy from Spinal Tap is explaining like what he's been working on. And it's like this beautiful piano piece. And they ask him what it is, and he goes, "Lick My Love Pump." And so it's like,
Yep. And but I think my standout track is Hell's Bells on this. I really love that bells tolling motif, that when they do that on rock songs, it really kind of makes it ominous and sets a mood right away. And that combined with the like massive guitar behind it as it starts really just kind of sets the stage, and for the whole album really it's just a great song.
So Josh, greater bell part, Hell's Bells or For Whom the Bell Tolls by Metallica?
Yeah, that I thought of that. I'd say Hell's Bells probably.
Gotcha.
I also kind of like the bridge on Shoot to Thrill when they drop out the guitar and there's no lyrics, and it just shows the I think it's drums and like the keyboard, or I guess it is a guitar. I can't remember, but it's like kind of a relief, and then or like a respite, and then they like go back into the ramp it up again.
And Brian Johnson's vocals are like, that's the ultimate Brian, because they're so urgent, right? It's like he's just like playing like shoot, like the whole time. It's just kind of like, I don't know how to describe it, but it like sets up that urgency perfectly,
Yeah, so in some ways this is like the easiest hard rock album to probably give someone. It kind of encapsulates everything that hard rock is about in kind of this easily digestible manner, and there's not a lot of complexity, but like you said, there's not you don't need that all the time. And so I like this album. I don't love it, especially, I don't know, compared to other albums that we'll discuss in the 80s, but it's fun.
Yeah, I do love this album, but just kind of in a different way than because it's for all the reasons that you guys have said, and I think it's amazing that
you can catch the lyrics this time.
I did catch the lyrics this time. the cake thing.
How did you read them, Matt? Were you able to
slice
interpret?
my cake with let me slice your cake with my knife might be my favorite lyric. I was just like, that was funny. That made me laugh. Like just like hearing the titles makes me laugh. Give the. Like, it's so ridiculous, but the music is so kick-ass. It's so great, and it's amazing that you could put on any one of these songs. And obviously, there's some songs I know on here better than others, but as soon as you hear it's something, you hear an AC/DC guitar riff or a drum beat or whatever, and it's like, that's AC/DC. They don't veer too far from their lane, but that doesn't take away from how enjoyable this album is, and how fun it is, and how just great it makes you feel, and there's something to be said for that. You keep doing relatively the same thing over and over again, and you're still really good at it. It doesn't get boring. That's awesome. And that's what this album is to me. There's definitely some standouts though. I absolutely agree with you, Josh. Hell's Bells stands out as as the best song on this record. That the opening bells, that guitar part at the very beginning is to me, it's a different level. It's got this menacing thing going on. I like how the drum comes in and they build up to it. And it's got my favorite part on this album. This might be what I start doing, is trying to figure out what's my favorite part of the record. And that comes it comes on Hell's Bells, where it's like where Johnson's vocals he's kind of really at the apex, and it going right into the chorus, and right when the guitar kicks in after that, it's so great. It's so well done, and it just makes me go, holy crap, what a freaking great song. One of the best opening tracks of all time, in my opinion. It's just so good. I agree with you. Shoot to Thrill and probably Shake a Leg are two great deeper cuts on this record. Really fun, really fast paced. Great full sounding guitar. I mean, Angus and Malcolm Young. I mean, Malcolm's doing the writing as well. He doesn't get as much props because he's not the poster boy of the band, but he's the rhythm guitar that he's playing there, just the double guitar. It's very full. It's very fun. And then You Shook Me All Night Long. That song was I remember that always being played at basketball games, for the high school basketball games that I would go to as a kid, and that was always that they would always have the cheerleaders dancing to that. That was the big song, and it's just got a great. I like the way that it opens, that little guitar, that little blues guitar riff, and then it kicks into the actual song. Just so good. Brian Johnson's voice is unearthly. How do you make your voice sound like that for that long? I can't imagine. It's like an Axl Rose type of voice, where it's just
Bruce Dickinson.
Yeah, it's and to get your voice that raspy and to sing that as much as he does, probably in all the live shows that he does, it's unreal that he hasn't lost his voice, permanently. So, I mean, this lays the foundation for bands like Guns N' Roses, which are one of my favorites of all time. It's just really great rock and roll. Yeah, it is kind of dumb in some ways, but it's we need music like this. And I agree, John. I think, I don't know, I don't really know where this is coming from nowadays. I'm not as hip to the music of today anyway, so I don't know if I would be aware of it. But this is in some ways this is timeless as well, because I can't imagine anybody that likes any type of popular music or rock and roll just being it's a great album. It's freaking Back in Black, So a huge thumbs up for me.
Can I do a little thing where I give a couple deep cut lyrics here for 5? So from Let Me Put My Love Into You, my favorite lyric there is, driving all night with my machinery, 'cause I got the power any hour to show you the man in me. That's one of my favorites right there. So very subtle right there. Down to 90 degrees. Ah, she's blowing me crazy till my ammunition is dry. That one is pretty fantastic. And then, oh no, she's no Mona Lisa. No, she's no Playboy star. But she'd send you to heaven, then explode you to Mars. Which might be my favorite lyrics on the entire album right there. So there you go.
It is Spinal Tap-ish, very much.
I do enjoy reading lyrics when I find them amusing like that. So I'm going to try to continue to build that into this season when there are lyrics that are fantastic. So, and the fact that I listened to this album before Bauhaus also made me laugh, because boy, they're in totally different lanes. But yeah, easy recommend for me. I mean, come on, I worry about you a little bit if you can't like this album.
Yeah.
Who are you? Maybe you're Robert Christgau, and I wonder a little bit about did somebody who looks like Angus Young like punch him growing up? Is that how you get that take on that album, or is it just to like empty every $1 million word you own, to say that?
He is a very refined person. That's what made me laugh. Was like, wow, that's like for a refined person such as myself. Like, what are you sipping tea with your pinky out as well? Like, what are you like?
I mean,
I just imagine him saying like, "You're a troglodyte," and then just hitting him with the guitar and then playing. So yeah.
He's one of the original hipsters. You have to.
I guess it's just like
Writing
let it be what it
voice.
is. I don't think they're not trying to reinvent the wheel. They're not doing anything like they're making great rock music. So, they ended up with. I think this is the last time we're covering AC/DC. Period. Perhaps I don't know if we're going to do Razor's Edge or anything later on, but they do have a total of 17 studio albums, including a recently released album in 2020, Power Up. So they're still around. They were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1988, I should say. They have gone through a couple of lineup changes, but Brian Johnson and Brian Johnson actually wasn't touring with them recently because they actually had Axl Rose tour with them several years ago. Because I think Johnson actually the voice kind of gave in. Yeah, finally. And sadly, Malcolm Young died on November 18th, 2017. He had lung cancer, and he was also suffering from dementia. So pretty sad there. But Angus is still around and kicking, and they're still doing music. So big up to AC/DC.
You mentioned Razor's Edge, which had a lot of hits, but I actually will strongly recommend the two albums later in that decade, from when I was a teenager in college. Ball Breaker and Stiff Upper Lip are both very good albums. It's a but it is a good album, I have to say. So
they sing "Balls to the Wall" too. Isn't that an AC/DC song?
That's Accept, I think is the name of that
wait,
band.
I'm sorry. They have Big Balls. That's an AC/DC song.
Yeah,
Big
that's
Balls.
earlier than this. That's a
Right.
that's a
Bon Scott.
Bon Scott song. Yeah, Big
Got
Balls. Mm-hmm.